to have two speakers that are going to speak on behalf of continuing the North Lake Hospital tax. And we're going to have two speakers that are going to present against continuation of the tax. Each side is going to have 15 minutes to speak. Bob Fox is our official timekeeper. He's from Texas. You don't mess with Texas, okay? So adhere to the time schedules. After each side has had their 15 minutes, we're going to have 15 minutes of questions and answers from the audience. We do want you to write your question down on the index card. That way we know it won't be extremely long, and we're not going to take comments. We're only taking questions. You can address your questions to either side, and actually there's some other people here, some other financial officers, they may have answered questions. I see Catherine Hansen came in. She's the chairman of the board of the Hospital Tax Hospital Board. And she may, if you have a question for her, I'm sure she'd be happy to answer.
I'll be standing right here with a mic. Anybody wants to ask a question when it comes
okay,
time.
and that'll be after it. So, on behalf of the tax, we have Mr. Don Henderson, who is the CEO of Central Florida Health, Leesburg Regional, and we have David Otali, the CEO of Florida Hospital Waterman. Speaking against the tax, we have Florida House of Representatives, District 31, Rep. 32. Sorry, Jim. 31's over there. Attorney Larry Metz, Representative Larry Metz, and also Attorney Mark Fisher. So with no further ado, I'm going to step aside and let the hospital start. Thank you.
Good evening, everybody. I'm Don Henderson. I'm the CEO of Central Florida Health, which is a regional health system that operates the Leesburg Regional Medical Center and also the Villages Hospital and some other things too. We're going to hit the lights. I hope it won't get too dark in here. I'm a big lover of PowerPoint, and I understand I just have a short period of time, so I wanted to try to give you the best visual impact. One of the comments that we've heard through the grapevine is that this is not a very common thing, the tax district in North Lake. You can see here, here's an actual map of district funding in Florida. There are 32 active hospital districts in Florida, and 16 of them are independent taxing districts. But I also think it's a little bit misleading because in many counties around the state, there's a general revenue fund that funds it. For example, in Orange County, I know that there's a general fund that funds $120 million that's split between the Orlando Regional Hospital and Florida Hospital South. So, you know, certainly some of the no new taxes being proposed. The fund is for residents that are below the poverty line, and there's only U.S. citizens that are local tax district residents that are being treated by this program. You've probably heard some of this already, but there are 5 charitable clinics that operate in Lake County, in North Lake County, to serve the poor. And one of the misnomers out there is that these folks are somehow on welfare. No, the answer is no. Most of them are working poor. They work in the service industries. They collect the trash. They work in the hotels. They do agricultural work. So it's mostly the folks that benefit from this program are the poor that otherwise have no form of insurance. Unfortunately, Lake County has never really completely recovered from the recession. There are 300,000 people in Lake County, but about a tenth of them, at the present time, about 35,000 we estimate, do not have health insurance. The alternative to this tax district is that probably most of these clinics would have to shut down, and we can talk more about that later if time allows. But then those patients who are uninsured will show up at the emergency room at David's place and at my place, and you can say, well, so what? You're going to take care of them anyway, and that's absolutely true. But one of the key arguments is that these clinics provide primary care. They're mostly voluntary. You know, we serve the Leesburg area. We have a free clinic in Leesburg that serves over 8,000 patients a year. So if there was no demand, how do we have so many uninsured people coming through our doors? But obviously, most people know that preventative care is better than catastrophic care, and that's what we'd be looking at if we got rid of this tax district. Rather than talk about hospitals, because hospitals are kind of hard to get your arms around, I will say that we gave at Leesburg Regional over $16 million in charity care this past year. That's uncompensated care. The tax district gives us $3.5 million, I believe, this year. So you say, well, why do you need that? Well, $3.5 million is better than nothing. And we give 5 times greater charity care than we actually receive from the tax district. But nobody's going to be able to make a compelling argument for a brick building. I think it's more important to talk about some of the citizens that get this care. I wanted to introduce you to Bessie Bowman, who's a resident of Lady Lake. She worked as a long-haul truck driver for 25 years, and she had a good living and good health insurance. But when her heart went bad, and that's what happens for a lot of lower-income folks, they get a catastrophic medical event. When her heart went bad, she had to come to Leesburg Regional. She got emergency heart surgery. The cost of the heart surgery alone is probably $25,000, and we do a lot of them in Leesburg. We probably do about 700 a year right now, one of the larger programs in Florida. When she got the heart surgery, insurance company canceled her policy. That's what happens if most, I hope there's no insurance agents in the room, but that's what happens is you start using a lot of health care, you can get canceled by your insurance company. She returned to work, but then suffered subsequently. Since returning home to Lake County, she's been unable to get health insurance. It depends on the care provided by our local clinic, the one that's on Main Street in Leesburg. Without it, she would have no other place to turn except the area emergency rooms, which diminishes her chance to stay healthy. So, rather than talk about, hospitals or buildings, I mean, these are just some of the folks that benefit from this program. I'd like to challenge anybody in the room to say that nothing bad will ever happen to them. I'm a hospital administrator, so we study the history of healthcare. And you realize before 1965, everybody that was over 65 didn't have insurance either, unless you were wealthy. And so somewhere along the line in the Lyndon Johnson administration, they made a decision that everybody over 65 should have health insurance. Well, we haven't made that decision for the younger working poor, but I'd say the argument is the same. If you're going to provide insurance for elderly people, why can't you provide insurance for people that don't have it? But because Florida has chosen not to expand the Obamacare program, there's still thousands of people, what I estimate 35,000 people in Lake County without insurance. These are just some of the people. And that could be you, that could be me. And, when I was talking to somebody before the meeting tonight, it goes back to the fundamental policy question. Do we want the poor to have medical care that's good, or do we want to have them be embarrassed and basically have to come to our emergency rooms in time of need for basically catastrophic care? And all I can think of is Scripture. Truly I tell you, whatever you did for me, for one of the least of my brothers and sisters, you did for me. And that's where I wanted to stop. Thank you.
Thank you, Don. And thank you for being here tonight to listen to such an important topic. When you talk about the North Lake County Hospital District, it affects every single person that's here in North Lake County. Sometimes we don't realize it, but it does impact us because you never know when emergencies will happen. At Florida Hospital Waterman today, we see over 64,000 people coming into the emergency department. And many of those folks don't realize they're going to be there that morning. When they come in and when they get admitted and surgeries and all that infrastructure, there's a cost associated to take care of folks. When you look at that, in and of itself, it's a challenge here in Lake County. So my purpose today is to provide a little bit of education of how it works. The demographics in North Lake County, we have 22% of our population today is uninsured, like Don indicated. That's 22%. That's 1 out of 20%. 1 out of every 5 people that walk into an emergency department will not have insurance for the ability to pay. While we meet right here, probably we'll have 1 or 2 patients coming to our ED asking for help. We will treat those folks with everything we have. We will provide everything we possibly can to take care of those folks, but there's a cost associated with that. As a hospital, we are a non-for-profit organization. What does that mean? That means we reinvest everything we have right back in this community. If you take a look at Florida Hospital Waterman over the last 13 years, we have invested on average $17 million a year in infrastructure and healthcare into this community. We are absolutely committed to this community, and we want it to succeed. The district in and of itself is efficient, accountable, and effective. It's efficient because when you take a look at the infrastructure that Don mentioned, we have 5 clinics that are free clinics that provide a network of the cheapest care possible for the folks that need it. We have our behavioral health facility that also covers a segment of our population. And then we have 2 safety net hospitals, and when everything else is not available or they don't have access to that, we're there open 24/7. When we're sleeping, that engine is going, accepting everybody that walks into that door. It's accountable. When you take a look at Florida Tax Watch, it says the Florida Tax Watch is a bipartisan group that says that if you're going to create a tax district, you should have 3 things: an elected board of directors, one that's separated from the hospital, and an accountability program with that. North Lake has that. South Lake doesn't, but North Lake has that. We have all 3 things in place. We have an elected board. It's very accountable, and it's separate from our organizations. If you look at that, we turn around and there's a considerable amount of audits that happen to make sure that every dollar that's associated with this district goes to the cases that meet our criteria. Florida Hospital Waterman wrote off $11 million worth of charity last year. 11, that's after the $3.5 million we received from the taxing district. That's $14.5 million of charity. This does not include bad debt, people that don't pay. This is just pure charity, folks that qualified, that received, that could not get insurance in that window. It's an efficient system because everything we do, we want to make sure that we impact our patients in the most cost-effective way. If we can get them out to a clinic, that's great. We'll do everything we can to do that. In the end, I want to make sure you guys understand that this is your healthcare system. As nonprofit organizations, both organizations, we reinvest everything we have right here. And it's yours. It's the healthcare you see. And we want to continue to elevate the healthcare you see here. And if you look at Florida Hospital Waterman in 2015, we looked at our market share. More people started choosing to stay locally. And what that did in 2015 is we added an additional 100 jobs at our hospital, as opposed to folks leaving Lake County, going elsewhere for health care. It's also an economic engine. And I think that's important. In turn, I'll finish with this. There's a lady, her name is Twine. There's many of them who did not know that they're going to have an emergency, and eventually, boom, she came to our emergency department, ended up admitted. We were able to follow up with her in a free clinic, and she thanked us. She's like, man, thank you for the support and everything that you have here. She happened to be a 63-year-old lady who was working for 14 years before she lost her job. And as you know, healthcare sometimes can get very expensive if you don't have a job. She thanks you for the work and the work that this district does. And I thank you as well.
Dave and I have gotten to know each other quite well here in the last couple of days. We spent yesterday morning in his offices and last night at the Mount Dora Country Club having a similar forum, and again this evening. I'm here to speak on a portion of the opposition to continuation of this tax. And before we go any further, I'm going to read to you the actual measure that you will find on the ballot. Shall an independent special district known as the North Lake County Hospital District, with authority to levy each year an ad valorem tax not to exceed 1 mil to fund indigent care to qualified residents of the district, be continued for another 10 years. This tax has been in place since approximately 1960, so for 66 years. This is the first time that the taxpayers of Lake County, North Lake, have had an opportunity to indicate their acceptance of or approval of this tax or to reject it. Our opposition here is not animus toward the hospitals or the care that's being delivered. It's not animus toward the individuals who are seeking the charity care that's being provided. Rather, it's a recognition that there has been a sea change in the delivery of medical care in the United States in the intervening 66 years. And rather than allow a system that was imposed upon us nearly 7 decades ago to continue, we should vote this down and then utilize the provisions of existing Florida law to work with the county commission to design a system, should we want to, that meets the needs of the indigent in receiving medical care here in North Lake and Lake County as a whole. As David had indicated during our meeting and during last night's forum, one of the inequities that exists here is that Lake County is broken into 2 separate taxing districts, one that has an elected board and one that has an appointed one. We need uniformity there for the taxpayers of Lake County. And by voting this down, we would start the process of being able to reinvent the delivery of indigent care at the taxpayers' expense in Lake County. All of these vessels, the vessel that we are traveling under now, has seen multiple changes that have made it an ineffective way to transmit care. You've got Medicare, Medicaid, and now ACA have all come into play. These are all matters that we need to take into focus and understand and factor into any reinvented program that we choose. But we should have our hand on the wheel in doing so. It should be something that we have an opportunity to participate in and not just have force from top down, but rather should come from the bottom up. And with that, I'll conclude.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. I'm Larry Betts, and I'm here to oppose the continuation of the North Lake County Hospital District. First of all, it does have a long history. Mark mentioned some of that history. But if you just think back to what Lake County must have been like decades ago when these districts were first created, we were a rural backwoods county. We didn't have a lot of people living here. And so in order to have hospitals sustain themselves, apparently this idea was popular and they enacted it through a special act of the legislature. But roll forward to 2012, when I was elected in 2010, and in 2012 I sponsored a reform bill to bring transparency, oversight, and accountability to the district. And so the things that they're saying they like about it now are because of the bill that I ran in 2012. But they opposed that bill back then. Make no mistake about it, they being the hospitals and their people. Not these particular gentlemen, but their predecessors in interest. So I'm pleased to hear them say that everything's working well now, but I wish they had been more helpful back then. Needless to say, the reason why I oppose the continuation of this district and why I fought so hard to get it on the ballot for you to make this decision is my primary philosophical objection to corporate welfare. And that's exactly what this is. Now, first of all, there's a lot of changed circumstances that have occurred since then. We mentioned some of them earlier. Medicare, Medicaid came in the 1960s. We had the Children's Health Insurance Program after that. We have Obamacare and the subsidies now. So the things that occurred back then when they created this are no longer appropriate, or no longer applicable, I mean. Now, the hospital's wants are real, but their needs are not a government function. They're not government agencies, and we shouldn't be using the taxing power of government to force you to pay. Every one of you, both homeowners and businesses in North Lake County, have to pay a sum of money to the district so that it can then redistribute that money to these private tax-exempt hospital corporations. And the reason why they're tax-exempt, because they have to do charity care. They don't pay taxes on income, on property, on sale, on purchases that they make. And as a result of that, they're required to provide charity care, and they do provide charity care. But to have a layer of subsidization on top of that is double dipping, in my opinion. Now, they don't need the money, they want the money, and they can always use the money. I would stipulate they can use the money, but that's not the issue when you're talking about government power to tax people's private property. It should be a government function to a government agency that receives that, and only to the extent necessary to fulfill that necessary government purpose. Now, I have some facts and figures for you to consider when I mentioned that they don't need the money. I looked at some numbers, and in 2013, Leesburg Regional Medical Center had over $10 million in revenue over its expenditures that year. And I want to mention something, but I want to caveat it. Their CEO compensation is in line with private sector organizations. I don't criticize them for getting the money they get, but the CEO of Leesburg Regional that year, $717,400 a year. Waterman, 31.4 million revenue over expenses in 2013. CEO compensation, $635,320. And they spent $1 million that year to advertise and promote themselves in the community. Again, I'm not critical of their compensation. They've earned it. They have the right to get that. It's a private business. That's the reason why we don't need a taxing district to support it. It's a private business enterprise. The fact that it's non-profit simply means there's no shareholders to receive dividend checks. The excess revenue over expenses is used to reinvest in the community. They consider this tax to be a source of revenue to reinvest in their hospitals. My point would be the reinvestment decision should be yours individually to make. If you feel if this tax is defeated on November 8th and you want to make a contribution to the hospitals, you can write a check for that tax amount to their foundation, send it in, and they'll receive that as a charitable contribution, and you've fulfilled your charitable intent, and they can have their money to reinvest based on those givings. But it shouldn't be mandated by government. Now, we have 2 hospitals here today. LifeStream is the 3rd hospital that receives funds under this framework. But I have to single out the Adventist Health System especially here because Waterman is part of that. They're one of 46 hospitals in the country and 26 hospitals in Florida. And the Adventist chain is also not-for-profit. Their bottom line after expenses last year was over $500 million, that organization. They have plenty of money to reinvest in their system if they need to. So I would say to you that there's no reason to have one of 26 hospitals in Florida. By the way, most of those 26 hospitals do not get support from the taxing district. Mr. Otani came from Florida Hospital Flagler. They don't have a tax system up there. So why should Lake County residents be forced to pay tax to support these private organizations? Another reason why I'm opposed to the special district model of hospital taxation, they mentioned other counties have general revenue. Those county commissions are accountable for that as part of their overall duties in those counties. Here you have a special district that flies well below the radar. You have non-competitive elections. Most of the time those elections are filled without opposition and they're filled with candidates that these organizations recruit. And they are not really thinking out for the taxpayers. They've had the opportunity for 4 years now under my bill to lower the millage rate. They have not done that. They charge the full mill every year. They haven't even gone for the rollback rate one time, even though they've had the ability to do that. Again, because they're listening to the hospitals and they're thinking that this is needed. But if you look at the numbers, it's not needed. It's simply a want, and we shouldn't be funding private organizations' wants with tax dollars. So I want to also mention to you, Sumter County was asked to vote on this very issue, not this district, but the issue in 2004. Apparently the legislators in office back then, or prior to that year, passed a bill that would create a new taxing district in Sumter County. The voters in Sumter County voted it down that year, 2004. So Sumter County doesn't have a hospital district, nor does Marion, nor does Seminole, nor does Orange. Volusia has 3 of them, we have 2 of them. So we're outliers in that regard. But my point in mentioning that is healthcare in Sumter County hasn't degraded because the citizens there voted down that request for a taxing district. The folks in the villages, I think, are quite happy with their medical care without that taxing district. So in closing, those of you who are going to be here for the later meeting of the LREC, my recommendation to you is to support the resolution on the floor that would urge a no vote on November 8th. And my recommendation to you as voters would be to vote no on November 8th. Get rid of this district now. It's the only chance you'll have to do so. If you don't do it, it will be around forever. And so my advice is vote no on November 8th. Let's terminate it. And then if we have to circle back and figure out a better system that's more targeted to the non-Adventist type organizations that might actually need some help, it could be done on an ad hoc basis in the county budget. It could be done through special appropriations by the legislature. It doesn't need to be done by this one-size-fits-all tax district that benefits hospitals that are already well in the black. And with that, I conclude my remarks. Thank you very much.
Okay, now we're going to go into 15 minutes of questions. And if anybody has a question, come out here where Andy is. He's got a microphone, and you can address your question to any of these gentlemen.
Representative Metz, question for you. Do you as an attorney in the state of Florida have a statutory obligation to give free attorney advice?
No, I don't.
Okay, that makes that a significant different situation than the hospital.
Well, except that I pay
Not
tax.
well, no, I understand
I pay
that.
tax on my income.
But the state and the federal government requires that the hospital give indigent care no matter what. I'll ask you, if the same statute applied to attorneys, would you expect some compensation from the government?
No, pro bono work is pro bono. That's how it should be handled. And we do report our pro bono participation. But I didn't consider that to be, it was more of an argument than a question.
I wanted to ask the hospitals, we understand that there may be, in the nonprofit sector, you reinvest your surplus operations, let's put it that way. So compared to the amount of money that you had in surplus over operations, how much did you reinvest in capital into the hospital? And also, how much debt does each hospital also servicing?
Right.
Approximately.
Casey, those are good questions. You know, we estimated in the most recent year that we put about 17 million into infrastructure. And again, David's might be in a different situation, but the Leesburg Hospital is essentially 50 years old. And for us, I don't know if you've been there, but it's a very beautiful place. But for us to be able to keep up with technology, we do have to reinvest our money. And to go to Larry's point, unlike other systems, you know, our system, Central Florida Health, is locally owned, locally governed, and if you say who actually owns it, it's really the community. So I suppose if we could become a public entity, if that's in the interest of the community, but the work is getting done either way, and poor people are being served, and I'm very comfortable. I would like to challenge Larry or anybody else that'd like to come with me, either to the hospital emergency room on Saturday night, or to our clinic, which is on Main Street there, and see some of the patients that are being treated there, and we are meeting the community obligation. David.
I appreciate the question. When you talk about Florida Hospital Waterman, I think Larry's a little bit mistaken, because every single one of our hospitals have to stand on its own 2 feet. We have 46 hospitals all over the country. It's a big organization. We have had to divest ourselves of certain hospitals that we've not been able to make work in different places. Luckily in this community, we continue to invest, and it's still working here. It's long term. When you drive by, you can just see the infrastructure and the investment that we've made. We've made, let's see, 17 million, so $230 million worth of investments in the last 13 years. Huge amount of investment right here. This is your health care. If you were born at the previous Florida hospital, at the previous Waterman, you have seen the changes that have transpired, and those come at a cost. So everything that we make here stays local. And if we dip down here, then we will not be able to invest as much. It's just the philosophy that we have within our organization. Luckily, we have a parent organization that tries very hard to make sure that we are efficient and effective as an organization as well. That's a strength. That's something that we're able to bring to this community, and it's why we've been able to invest more here with this with Adams Cell System than we might have if we were by ourselves. So everything we have, we invest right back here. If it drops down, we just invest less.
Of the 16 taxing districts, there's only 14 that still tax, okay? And out of that 14, how many are private corporations and how many are community hospitals?
I don't know. We don't know the answer to that.
You don't know it?
No.
Oh, that's too bad.
I have a printout of my card of all the hospital districts. I can give them to you, but I don't know about that.
Most of them are community hospitals.
Which could be a problem, because maybe it's a problem when some of them can't be efficient or effective. So at some level, you have to have an expertise to run an organization so that you can invest. I mean, would you want to be part of a hospital system that's falling apart? Is that the health care you want? I mean, like, is that, if the thing is falling apart, then all of a sudden it's like, okay, let's help them out. No, you want a vibrant system. If I have a medical condition, I want to come into an organization that treats me professionally, that has the ability to take care of me today, not sometime in the future. And that's what we're doing today. We're addressing everything we have right here.
One of the misstatements that's out there is that somehow Leesburg Regional is different from other hospitals around the country. I mean, if you look at the history of hospitals in the United States, and it could be an hour-long lecture, I won't bore you with it, but almost all of the hospitals in the United States, there's probably about 4,000 hospitals now left in the United States. By the way, hospitals are closing all over the country, especially in rural areas. About 600 hospitals are going to close in the next year because of economic conditions. But of the 4,000 hospitals in the United States, about 3,000 are the same organization as David's hospital and my hospital. They are voluntary, not-for-profit hospitals, and most communities use that structure. The public hospital is pretty rare. These are mostly community-owned, community-governed organizations. So to try to claim that we're somehow different or that we're private, we are a private not-for-profit, but we're no different from any other charitable organization. Most of them are private not-for-profits as well.
Larry, I'd like to ask you a question. You keep saying that it's $1 million. Could you tell everyone what $1 million means from a $100,000 house or a $200,000 house?
It's 1/10 of 1%. On a $200,000 house, it's approximately $200.
$200. I pay more than that in sales tax on my cell phone. Thank you.
I'm trying to phrase this as a question. You mentioned that if the district wasn't here, that there would be some other mechanism to fund the indigent care. Because obviously it needs to be funded. Everybody, I think, is open to that people shouldn't be dying in the county because they can't afford to see a doctor. So it's going to get funded. It's going to get funded through a tax on millage through the county. The county then is going to tax the residents and give it to the indigent care? Or is it going to come through some other means? Are you going to run it through the school board? Because the school board is a district also that we pay a millage tax on that takes care of a function of educating our children, including our indigent children. How's it going to happen?
Well, there are federally funded health clinics now that serve the indigent in Lake County. There's one in Groveland, there's one in Leesburg, I think there's one in Umatilla. So we have that base covered already with federally funded clinics. The other thing is the other counties that don't have hospital districts, I don't know what they do or don't do specifically. I haven't studied their situations, but the county commission has the plenary authority to raise money for the legitimate needs of the county. If they make a decision that they want to do that, they certainly can do that to some extent or to no extent or to a great extent, depends on what their preferences would be. But indigent care is already covered under the tax-exempt status of these hospitals. That's what they're supposed to do when they don't have to pay any tax, is provide charity care.
And just a follow-up on that. If it's not getting paid for by a function of government, and I'll submit to you the preamble of the Constitution says that a function of government is to provide for general welfare. If it's not being paid for by the government, then it's going to get paid for by the rest of us who do have insurance, right? It's about 70% of the 75% of the folks that come through the hospital have either Medicare or Medicaid. So the other 20 or 25% of us that have insurance, we're just going to pay more. So it's a tax on us disproportionately, but one way or another, it's going to get paid for. Because if it's not paid for, then it's not going to happen. And the counties that don't have a mechanism for paying for indigent care, their people die.
We have another question.
There is no health care without money.
Most of us don't realize how we are spoiled by the health care we have until you need it. So when someone is diagnosed with cancer or needs something, it's very easy to get a CT scan, it's very easy to get a bone biopsy in a very few days. And when it's your loved one, you want that done now. Most of us do as well as indigent care people. But my question here is, if we don't have the taxing district and we're going for something else, how long is it gonna take to get something else? And is it gonna take 5 years, 6 years, and the investments go down so that we have less equipment, less advanced technology for the people that we have that are loved ones with illness? So how long do you anticipate getting something to replace the hospital district?
Well, I'm not necessarily conceding that we have to have something to replace it the way it currently exists. That would not be something that we have to do. We have hospitals that are operating well in the black, that don't pay any taxes, that have an obligation under existing federal law to provide emergent, indigent care in their emergency departments. And if they want to divert those folks that are not emergent to a local health care clinic like the federally funded clinics I mentioned, they can do that. So there's no reason why Lake County has to be one of 12 counties that has this type of hospital taxing district, when 55 other counties don't have it. And if we eliminate this district, we can start fresh and see where we are. It's not to say that if we eliminate this, we can never do anything else.
And
So,
I agree, I just wanted to know how long it's going to take to replace that, because in the meantime, there's no investment.
Another question, Nancy.
I mean, I ran in 2010 on a reform agenda for the North Lake County Hospital District, and I got it done 2 years later. And I think that's certainly a window that you could say is reasonable.
Larry, you mentioned that perhaps another plan could be put in place for the entire county. Why wasn't South Lake put on the ballot to vote, have folks vote whether they wanted it at the same time this one was? Because otherwise this one's going to, if it is voted down, then we don't have that health care here, but they have it in South Lake.
Well, a couple of things, Chairman. First of all, I think that was Mark that said something about a countywide replacement. I didn't say that. I'm not advocating for that. But the reason why I reformed the North Lake Hospital District and not the South Lake Hospital District is because when I ran in 2009, 2010, this was a very important issue to the people that I campaigned in front of. And the job that I was running for, the job that I am doing now, is representative. And so you take the input of your constituents, you hopefully get that on the campaign trail so that when you get elected, you're able then to know what you're supposed to do for the 160,000 people that you represent. So I had a very clear mandate from that election to reform the North Lake County Hospital District. And that district, by the way, before the 2012 bill, was a complete general subsidization of the hospitals. It didn't have anything in it about what the money was to be used for other than continued hospital services. And the names of the hospitals were listed in the bill, and the percentages that they were to get were listed there. So, and the millage rate was non-variable, had to be either 0 or 1 mil. So for years, for decades, all the district did was collect the money and write checks to the hospitals without any accountability at all. In 2002, the amount of money collected by the district was $6 million, and by 2007 it was $12 million because of increases in development and also property values went up. And there was no reduction in the millage rate, no nothing. It was just a complete subsidization. So the reason why I acted on it was that I was elected to do that. South Lake is a problematic area as well. That district has an appointed board. They're not even elected by the people. They're appointed only. They have ad valorem taxing authority. And so that has to be looked at as well.
Hi, Van Shogum. Having been an auditor for many years, I'm going to ask a cash flow question for each of the hospital representatives. And that's that each of you are part of a holding company operation where you have parent companies. And maybe you could explain, there's some suspicion that these funds that are being given to the hospitals are being funneled out to parent companies, or maybe subsidizing the villages and the construction of the hospital up there. And so maybe you could address that issue. Thank you.
Yeah, I think the easiest way to address that is to talk about how much we submit in claims versus how much we're paid back by the tax district. So in this previous year, I believe we submitted almost $5 million. I believe we submitted a similar amount of claims. Now, when you say you submitted $5 million claims, that's not at gross charges. That's at cost base, which is basically Medicare reimbursement rate. So we submitted over $5 million. Both hospitals did, and we got paid $3 million back. So just in indigent care alone for that amount. The other thing I wanted to address, I'm like Donald Trump, I add extra things. So the other thing I wanted to address is the federal clinics, because Larry says that they're great. They're not great, they're terrible. They're very small. Come with me to Main Street and go to the federal clinic on Main Street. It's very small, it's tiny. There's just one nurse practitioner in there most of the time. It will not be able to meet the community needs. Now, I guess we can go lobby with the federal government and see if that's going to work, but these clinics are very small. They're not even a drop in the bucket to try to help the community need.
I'll just make one point as well, Vance. And thank you for that question. When you mentioned how does it work, and I know Larry mentioned the whole company Adventist health system, and I thought I addressed that already. Each hospital has to stand on its own two legs. Waterman has to stand on its own two legs. We've had to joint venture hospitals in Texas. We've had to look at the ones in Chicago because we've had a challenging time managing it because of the dynamics in that community. This one, whatever we make, stays right here. That's how it works. We've had to close a hospital in North Georgia because we weren't able to make it work. So our commitment is local. We reinvest everything locally that we make. But if things don't go very well, then we also have to make those hard decisions as well.
I heard the question, or I heard the statement about everyone will be conducted in emergency rooms. What happens if we vote it down to Lake Supplemental Health and what I gather are clinics that are being operated right now? Where do they get their funding?
Yeah, the misnomer, and I think very aware of this, is before we had this new bill in place. By the way, the new bill that Larry put it forward in 12, all that's really done is add to the administrative costs of our systems. It really hasn't changed anything. It just means that I had to hire 5 people at my hospital to file these claims that otherwise could have been giving patient care to you and me and everybody else in the community. So while you think accountability is a great idea, there is a cost involved with that. I'm not against being accountable, but the other side of it is all it's done is add to bureaucracy and hasn't really changed the delivery of care in our area. But to talk about these clinics, we're still going to be a charitable organization if the measure's voted down. We're still going to do everything that we can do. But I've got to tell you, I don't see any of our board members here tonight, but there are people like you that serve without pay on our charitable board. We've had discussions about what services we're going to have to shut down. And quite frankly, those discussions were active. And the clinics, I can't, before the tax district bill was passed in 12, we provided 100% of the funding for the clinic on Main Street. And we'll do the best we can is all I can say, but I don't want to speak to the issue. I hate to believe that this is going to happen, but if it does happen, we'll just have to make operational adjustments. And I can't say, if I have to fund a clinic on Main Street and I've got to fund the emergency room 24/7, I just can't say that I'm going to be able to do both, but I'll do the best I can.
Anybody else have a question that hasn't asked one yet?
Yeah, I've got one. What about I apologize for being late getting here, but I got delayed. Did you address the LIP funding, the low-income pool, and if not, would you please address that and tell us what effect it will have if we, I know the LIP funding goes away next year, but immediately, what effect will it have if we pass this idea of killing the tax district?
Thank you, yes, Senator. Appreciate that question. LIP has been declining at the federal level for a number of years. That's a program in the past where we could take the tax district money and send it up to Tallahassee to get even additional matching funds, and those are based upon actual community need. It doesn't go, the LIP match does not go to every community, it only goes to the hospitals that have a high charity burden like Leesburg Regional. But this year, LIP is uncertain. As the Senator pointed out, next year the LIP fund may be gone. And it's going to be another blow to our healthcare system, to be honest with you. We're actually on the board of the Florida Hospital Association. We're actually trying to propose a different system, but we're going to need the support of Larry and Jennifer and everybody in the room to get some other alternative ways to draw down some more Medicaid funding, because obviously it's all part of one big system.
Let me just add to that on the LIP. It stands for Low Income Pool, and it's a program that the federal government has funded whereby certain hospitals that receive public support can get matching funds through the state capital. But that program, as the Senator mentioned, is going to go away next year. If this vote on the North Lake District is voted down on November 8th, and so the district is terminated, it would be at the end of its fiscal year next year. So all the funding would continue until the end of next year, and therefore it wouldn't have an effect on LIP.
I hate to disagree, but the bottom line is LIP is gone, and it's not going to be here next year, and it's just another brick on the wagon, to be honest with you. Federal government has told us LIP is dead, and unless tonight he wants to propose something different, that's really where we're at.
I just want to clarify. Yes, we agree, LIP is dead next year, but between now and then, the district will continue to be funded through the collection of revenue through the end of its next fiscal year. So, in other words, there'd be no lack of participation in an existing LIP program because of this no vote. It would simply continue to operate until next year when the program goes away anyway.
I have a quick question. I just would like to know from the hospital, I know a couple of people that are retired and on Medicaid or Medicare. And they have insurance, but they are harassed about payment to be made to the hospital. The indigent, are they harassed? That's my question.
That's true.
You know, I would probably ask my CFO over here to answer that question. But,
There we go.
you know, when you take a look at that, when you take a look at indigent, we actually have a policy that works through that process. We have folks who will work with the indigent folks all the way through. We do payment plans. We do a number of different things. If you qualify for write-offs, we write it off as well. We wrote off $11 million last year. That's a lot of write-offs. So we do try, if we can, we would like for folks to enroll in Medicaid. So we do have folks at the hospital that does everything possible to enroll in Medicaid. So that's something that we try hard to do. But some folks don't qualify for that and still do not have the ability to pay for insurance. Once you get a denial letter, once you get a number of other things, then we work through a charity process to write that off as well. So.
You know, one of the things about being a community hospital administrator is you can't run away and you can't hide. I mean, if anybody has a problem with their bill, my picture and my website, and everybody knows how to call me, and I'm not aware of anybody being harassed, to be honest with you. And it could have happened in the past at some point, but if anybody has a bill or a problem that they can't seem to get resolved, they just need to call me and I'll take care of it.
Okay, that concludes our public forum. I want to thank everybody for joining us.